Afternoon, guys. Today we have part 3 of one of the main reasons you didn't see that buck at your stand site last fall. And it has to do with what the sounds you made while you were hunting last year. Sounds that probably inform that whitetail what you are and what you're doing and where you're located, making it easy for that whitetail to identify you and avoid you during the rest of the hunting season, which they do very readily. And you're learning that now. Now, I won't go back over what we did on our second part of this series, but we'll start right out with the third part. And what I'm going to talk about today is how we prepare our trails that we're going to use during the hunting season. And that's an important part of buck hunting, really important part of buck hunting. If you've never done it before, here again is another big reason why you probably don't see big bucks very often while you're hunting whitetails. So it's important to know. Now, because it's so important, my boys and I almost always, every year, will spend at least 2 or 3 periods in our hunting area preparing for the coming hunting season. And one of them then, each one is about 4 days long, sometimes 5, sometimes 3, but average about 4 days. And we stay there, we camp out in our tents and that kind of thing while we're doing that. And the first period usually happens in early spring or late spring, soon after snow melt and before wood ticks become common. And in our country, that usually means about the last week in April, if the way things work out. And this year, when we went up there during that period, it snowed twice, which was kind of nice for finding deer signs. We didn't find many because of the low population of deer, but we did find some really interesting spots to hunt, places where some of these older bucks have been hiding out during our hunting season, so we're kind of excited about that. So we located them during that period, and we established one new trail, marked it, that we call the Moose Trail. But in the process, we discovered we need a whole new main trail, a cruise trail through this one area where we did most of our exploring last spring. And so that's our next job. We need a new cruise trail up there that connects with old parts of old cruise trails. So that'll be a big job for us. But we go up 3 times, and we've got our second trip coming up pretty soon in September, sometime after the middle of September. One of the advantages of going in September, after mid-September, is that normally whitetails shed velvet about the 1st of September. And then all month long, the bucks are getting together, or feeding together, and they're battling during that period. When we're up there in September, we spend most of our time looking for mature buck stand sites adjacent to feeding areas, whitetail feeding areas. And now we're starting to get serious about feeding areas because that's where whitetails spend 90% of their time when they're up in the active during daylight hours during hunting seasons. They're in feeding areas most of the time during daylight hours. And the rest of the time at midday they're bedding, except under certain weather conditions. So we spend most of our time hunting at feeding areas in November. Anyway, so that's what we're doing up there at that time. And so we'll spend a good part of our time doing that. But probably more than 50% of those 4 days that we're going to be out there in September will be spent doing trail work, preparing trails that we're going to use during the hunting season. And that's important in buck hunting because the way we do it, trails, and the way we use them, trails, these trails enable us to get to stand sites without seriously alarming any deer along the way. Now, in our state, it's illegal for us to create trails in the wood, on public land in the woods where we hunt for ourselves. You can't go out there and make trails. And for that reason, we use deer trails. We borrow deer trails from the deer. And usually they're well-used deer trails, you know, and they're already fairly clean. If you go cross-country in our country, man, you just run into all kinds of stuff, and there's no way to move silently cross-country through that area. Now, we've learned over the years, doing this, you know, getting ready before hunting, that our whitetails, including the big bucks, don't seem to mind if we adopt for our own use a small percentage of their trails during the hunting season. You know, actually we probably end up using only at the most about 5% of all the trails in a square mile that whitetails can use. And as long as they got all kinds of alternative ways to go anywhere they want to go in their hunting areas, they don't care if we use certain trails. Especially if we use them, we're using the wolf roost, you know, walking as if we're not interested in deer hunting at all, we're just going somewhere, and walking softly. Why do we keep doing that? They don't care if we keep using the same trail throughout a hunting season or several same series of trails throughout a hunting season, as long as they got all these other trails to use. So that doesn't bother them at all, including it doesn't bother big bucks. It's altogether different, you know, if you're walking around every day all over the place through the hunting season, or making a drive through there, and they got trails sent all over the place, and all these trails, when you're using a lot of those trails, a lot of those deer, especially the older deer, and especially big dominant bucks, will move out of there. And they're gone for the season if they do that. So that won't happen if you just use a few. So that's why we have one series of connecting deer trails that we've talked about before called the cruise trail that we use to find fresh signs each day during the hunting season. And the trails that branch off of that go to different stand sites, and each one of those trails is only used once and occasionally twice during the hunting season. That's it. And then we don't use any other trails, no matter what, throughout the hunting season. And if we stick to those trails, and we do it as if acting harmless while we're doing it, you know, when we're on the move, won't bother those whitetails a bit. They'll stay in there the whole hunting season. And that, of course, and doing normal things in normal places, you know, predictable places, every day throughout a hunting season. Well, weather permitting and that kind of thing. So, anyway, that's what we do. Now, when we use a deer trail, we're very careful about how it looks when we're done. We're always thinking, when we adopt a deer trail, when we're done with it, you know, now it's ready for hunting, we want it to look just like an ordinary deer trail. If anybody came along and they walked across one of the Nordberg trails during the hunting season, if there was no stone around, they looked around, it doesn't look any different than any other deer trail. And that's the way we want it. And I think that's the way people who manage our forests like it too. They don't want us chopping down trees, sawing down trees, making big wide paths enough for an ATV or something like that. We would never do that because we don't want any ATVs on our trails. And if you ever make an ATV trail and you put big ATV tracks on it, everybody who owns an ATV and hunts there where it's public land is going to follow those tracks. And we just don't want any of that kind of. They're just little narrow deer trails that we use. So anyway, when we find, well, we decide we're going to use this trail, maybe it'll start out and finally get to our big looping trail. It's a bunch of series of deer trails that goes widely through that square mile. And each square mile we hunt has got a cruise trail in it. And then that's what we use for finding fresh deer signs. and then branches coming off and going to stand sites. Some of my boys use tree stands on opening weekend, and they go to tree stands, and then after opening weekend, we're all going to ground level stand sites from that on. And some of them only selected the day we hunt, or minutes before we start hunting in a certain spot, based on fresh signs we find out there in the woods. One of the biggest things we have to do is clean those trails, and the reason is whitetails don't have opposing gums, and they aren't very good at removing dry sticks and branches on the trail. And us big-footed hunters, we come in there and we don't want to be stepping on twigs that break loudly under our feet all the way to the stand site, because that'll make it absolutely evident that we're humans. Here comes the human in the woods. So we want to get rid of sticks and twigs and stuff laying in the deer trail. We're picking up sticks and throwing them aside, and some of them are bigger and some smaller. And we don't cut down any trees. If we have something in the way, sometimes a big tree falls on the trail. Well, that happens every year. New trees fall, and we'll have a big tree laying across there. But we don't cut trees. We don't try to make everything absolutely perfect along straight lines, that kind of thing. If we have to, rather than use a saw to get where we're going, chainsaw or otherwise, or axe, we'll go around it. And maybe we'll have to snip a few hazels off. So here's our trail going around this fallen tree. And then we'll mark it. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But we clean our trails up so they can be walked on quietly. That's an important part of what we do. So cleaning trails is a big job for us every fall. It sounds like an awful job. It isn't really. You get 2 or 3 guys working together going down the trail. It doesn't take long. You can do a lot of trail in a relatively short period of time. But honestly, we have miles and miles of such trails in the woods after 31 years of studying whitetails there and hunting there. All kinds of them. But from year to year, sometimes we're using different trails. It's not uncommon. Every year we have new trails, or we'll cut off something, or we'll extend our cruise trails one way or another. And that happens a lot. So there's always trail work to do. So we get them clean, make sure that our cruise trail is open. And the idea is you got to be able, when you go out there in the morning, or anytime, you got to be able to walk steadily, non-stop, without getting lost, going all the way to your stand site. And so we don't want to have to be stopping along the way because something is in the way or whatever going out there. We're going to be able to just walk right along, no trouble, in this little narrow deer trail going out into the woods. And deer have done most of the work for us by their repeated passages on the road. So there's bare dirt and chopped up soil, or where the deer have been walking for years maybe, So we got trails like that to use to start with. And they're narrow, sure. And most of them are made by does and they're young. Big bucks they don't make many trails. If a buck likes to go someplace a lot, it doesn't look like much of a trail because it's just one deer using it. But most of them are Doe family trails. That's one of our jobs to do. And then the other one is we got to be able to get to stand sites or get back to camp in darkness. We generally go out when it's really dark yet in the morning. And so you have to, in the dark, you want to be able to go right to that stand site without stopping, even if it's 2 miles away, go right through, get there. And in the evening, we generally stay out there until it's dark, half hour after sunset. It's dark, start back. We want to be able to get back without getting lost and move steadily then. You're moving steadily then because, you might pass a lot of deer in the dark and you don't want to frighten them. You want them to be there in the morning. So, and you might find on signs on the way back, geez, that big buck crossed the trail and him and a doe. And when you're using adopted deer trails, the way we do it, they cross all the trails we use freely. And use long portions of them even freely, because they get to realize, gee, we only go out there early in the morning, and we only come back after 11, and a lot of deer know that, and they know they can walk on this trail all they want in between time. They can walk on any time they want at night. there's periods they know they're perfectly safe to use the same trail, and they do it all the time. We find fresh deer tracks on those trails we use all the time, and that's what helps us to make sure we're always hunting close to big bucks every half day we hunt. That's what makes a big difference. So it's important to be able to walk on those trails in the darkness non-stop without getting lost. So what we put, and we've talked about this before, and you've seen photos of me putting these things on, but we use fluorescent tacks to mark the trail. And generally we like to put them about 2-3 feet above the base of the tree. And the reason is when you walk along you got to use the flashlight to see these tacks. When you put a flashlight beam out there, you can see 4 or 5, 6 of those tacks all lit up like Christmas tree balls, showing you the way to go. It's easy to follow. You just won't get lost when you got those out there. And you got to put a tack, 2-3 feet above the ground. It's high enough so it won't be covered by snow, but it's low enough so your flashlight beam isn't shining out like this parallel to the ground, because like say there's a feeding area you're heading to over there, and you know what, your flashlight beam flash around in that feeding area, taking all the deer are feeding out there. Here comes a human. So you got to keep that beam down. So we mark those trees about every 10 to 30 yards apart. And there's some openings where you think, oh, you might get confused, and there's no tree there to put a tack on. And so a lot of times it's pretty rocky where we are. It's Canadian shield country, and we'll put a rock out there in the open where you can see it and put another rock on top. And one rock on top of another, we call those rockmen. They act as trail markers along the way. So another thing we do, trails split, deer trails split a lot, and you can come along, and if you don't know, if you're not sure, am I supposed to go this way or that, to make sure we don't confuse with that, I like to take a dead part of a tree, or maybe a big branch or a log, and put it on the trail you don't want to go on, and you come along, and there's that branch or log land, and so we don't go that way, we go this way. So that's another common trail marker that we use. Well, I mentioned one kind of tack was like a thumbtack. Then we got another tack called a double-sided tack, and those are kind of nice. And you stick one of those on a tree. You don't need 2 on the tree. One of the things I found about those that things bump in, well, it's a bear, a moose, or deer. Sometimes they knock them off. Over the course of the year, you come back next year and there should be some tacks in. Where are they? And you find them maybe laying in the leaves down below, or they're buried by leaves. But that's not a big hardship. But anyway, when you use those on one side, you only need 1 tack on the tree. So that's the other kind we use. So that's the kind of work we do on the trails we use during the hunting season. And that works real well. And we're not making trails of our own, we're simply adopting previously established deer trails. Every year it seems we'll have some stand sites that, boy, we like that spot, but there isn't enough good concealing cover between here and there. It might be an opening 50 feet or longer even, to get to that clump of trees over there like evergreens or deep grass, or maybe just a single evergreen with a lot of deep grass around, maybe tree, good background behind this hillside or a big rock or something. But anyway, there's this opening between here and there. And boy, but we want to hunt there. We want to sit there. That looks just really like a dynamite spot. And like I say, we've always got some like that. And so what we do on those, most trails even, sometime before we're getting close enough to our intended stand site, we'll mark a tree, and I'll put 3 tacks on. They can be 3 along a single line up and down, they're close together, or it can be a triangle, one way or the other. Give 3 tacks there that tell us, you turn off your flashlight here, right here. Let's say it's been a warm day and you stuff your hunting coat in your pack, and this would be a good time to stop and carefully, quietly get my coat on, leave it open, get that all settled, get my my head net down over my face. And if I have to stop short and wait a little while, I'll sit down on my stool, put the stool down, sit there and wait until it's starting to get light so I can see the rest of the way to that stand site. Quit, as soon as I can see my way, I'm going to go. But in the meantime, I'm sitting there listening and watching over there. I'm saying, do you hear anything? Do you hear they're walking over? You're hearing twigs snap? Watch, well, like when they're eating browse, they'll break off a twig, and you hear that soft twig snap. You hear a swish of something walking through deep grass like that, and you're watching for a movement over there. And if you're sitting there, and it's been a whole quiet during the time you're sitting there, maybe it might be 20 minutes, you know, you're sitting there, it looks okay. I think it's okay now. I'm pretty sure it's okay to go the rest of my stand site right now. So, get up, put my stool on my back, and away I go. Maybe not real fast, but steady. And I'm looking around a little bit with my eyes. I'm not turning my head around, looking around and carrying around like that. I'm going to get over there because the deer might be over this way somewhere, over that way, and they'll see. They might see you go across there if that happens. With luck, that won't happen. I know I've got one like that where I crawl to the stand site so they can't see me. So whatever you have to do, but wherever we have a place where we've got that kind of a problem, we stop short before we go the rest of the way to the stand site. Otherwise, those 3 tactiles, turn off your flashlight because you're just about there. And usually in the morning, about the time we get there, there's no light yet, but there's starlight, moonlight, you know, the clouds are illuminated and there's a moon up above, and then you can sit there for a little bit and your eyes are getting used to the darkness, and now you can see your way, and then you can finish your walk to your stand site. Anyway, those 3 tacks are kind of an important part of the trails we make. Keep in mind, everything we're doing here is to create approaches to stands that make it easier for us to get there without being easily identified by whitetails. Or, if that doesn't work, to make sure those whitetails think that we're not hunting them. We're just going walking along this trail and steadily, we're not looking around, we're not hunting. And then they're happy with us, they stay there, and a lot of those whitetails along the way will end up being close to our stand sometime, maybe an hour later. Here's some of the deer you passed on the way out there, and they're out there in front of you because you didn't alarm them going there. So that's what we're up to, creating quiet trails all the way to stand sites. Here's another thing, you know, this is kind of neat. You know, I learned some years ago, in fact, the fall before I wrote my 9th edition Whitetail Almanac, I thought, you know, I got to write about this. And so that 9th edition deals a lot with this particular subject. But I learned that when we modify a trail, after we're done, those big bucks love those trails that we've groomed for silent passage. They just, you know, they become buck trails. I remember this one I was talking about that I spent some time on it, and my wife Jean was with me, and we got to the other end of the trail, and we took time off there. I had lunch, you know, by this little stream. It was kind of a pretty spot to sit and have lunch, and so after a bit, we said, well, let's go back. I want to go back over the other way because there's another trail there I need to work on. And we started back, and we come around a little corner there where the trail goes off into some deep grass on one side. And over there, about 30 yards, stood a great big buck on our trail. Now that trail, when I started out that day, there was no tracks made by big bucks on that trail. There were smaller tracks made by mature does and fawns and yearling does, smaller tracks, 3-inch, nothing, but not a lot of them, but they were on that trail. And when that big buck saw us there, we looked at each other and said, oh, I'm going up this way, and it left the trail. And we got up there, and there was 4-inch tracks deep in the soft spot for at least half that trail I just cleaned up. It was already exploring that trail and probably think, oh boy, this is nice. I'm going to use this one a lot from now on. And we found that big bucks love our trails. And so we always get our trail work done 2 to 3 weeks before a deer season. Because when you're out there doing stuff like this, you're going to alarm some deer, whether you like it or not. And they won't like it, and big bucks won't like it, and they'll be really leery about trails you use and maybe stand sites you selected. But after 2 weeks have passed, and your scents are gone, all your trail scents gone, what we do isn't terribly noticeable. What little change there might have been there, they get over that pretty quickly. And they're back to doing normal things in normal areas. And big bucks have decided, boy, I like these trails. And you know, in the last 30 years, we've taken quite a few big bucks on trails we've groomed because those bucks liked them. Some of those trails became buck stand sites because big buck was using it. There's been trails even in recent years where I've taken bucks after finding tracks of a buck on top of my tracks on the deer trail, and then hunting on a feeding area adjacent to that where they had walked to my tracks later in the day and taken the buck there. I've done it in a couple places in recent years. So sometimes those trails that we've kind of cleaned up for ourselves, made silent underfoot, became buck trails of big bucks. And a big buck, he'll learn. They only use this thing in the morning, and they only will use it again in the middle of the day, and they only use it in the evening. So between time, we can walk on that trail all we want, and they do it. And they become vulnerable for that reason. Not all of them, some of them are pretty clever. They aren't suckers when they start using your trail, but they'll use them, and that's good to know because, boy, then you know where they are, their vicinities. So these are some of the advantages that you have, lots of really important advantages you have when you prepare established deer trails for your own use. And do it in a way that nobody knows there's any but a deer trail, and do it very conservatively and do it the way we do it, and then leave it alone for 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks before the deer season begins, and you're in business. So, with that, guys, I got to quit again, but I got to talk to you more about this business of becoming silent, making it difficult for whitetails to identify you by the sounds you make during the hunting season. Well, with that, I've talked enough for this seminar. So, if you haven't got your book yet, get your book. If you haven't got it now and you want all the stuff to refer to that I talk about, it's right here. And with that, be sure to subscribe, hit that red button down there, and also the thumbs up button if you enjoyed what you learned today. And that's a favor to me and to YouTube. And with that, thanks a lot, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.